Bhutto was the quintessential charismatic personality. He was young, educated.
Zulfikar Bhutto was really a man of the world. He went to USC, and then he transferred to Berkeley, and then he went on to Oxford. And he wanted to be taken seriously on the global stage.
Bhutto was appointed to represent Pakistan at the United Nations. He was able to bring Pakistan in the middle of a lot of global discussions.
I think Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, what he had that made him so special was incredible eloquence, great belief in himself, and then a serious ability to do backroom deals.
Something that is very famous in Pakistan psyche, Bhutto, when he came to Washington, D.C. and met with Kennedy, Kennedy told him, Mr. Bhutto, if you were an American, you will be in my cabinet. Bhutto retorted back saying that, Mr. President, if I was an American, I'll be in your place. Here's a guy who goes to the White House and tells an American president that, you know what, I am better than you. He wanted to make sure that when he was in the camera, his crease was fine in his pants, that he always wore the right set of clothes, that he always wore the right cologne. And every young man wanted to copy him. Whatever he wore became a fashion. Very flamboyant. He was the GQ of Pakistan.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was courting my aunt, Nusrat.
The minute my father saw my mother, who was so absolutely gorgeous, I think he flipped and was love at first sight.
I remember my mother being glamorous, well-dressed, and, so competent.
Nusrat was not only a wife, but a close partner of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. She advised him extensively.
She was Iranian, and she was more modern than the average Pakistani woman. She famously drove a car when Muslim women were not driving cars at all.
The social consciousness of both parents was so powerful that it influenced all the children, not only Benazir, but Shahnawaz, Sanam, and Murtaza. It was like they were going to leave a legacy behind them so that the children could carry on, could carry forward. There was a reason why they were called the Kennedys of Pakistan.
Zulfikar's father, Shahnawaz Bhutto, profited from partition. He received from the new Pakistan a gigantic tract of land, larger than they can imagine, like Los Angeles County.
We were landowners, large landowners. My father was telling me, look at the way these people sweat in the heat and in the sun in the fields. It is because of their sweat that you will have the opportunity to be educated. And you have a debt to these people. You've got to come back and pay that debt by serving your people.
In a feudal system, everyone is beholden to the master. And this is what Zulfikar Bhutto, Benazir's father, came from, and what he was trying to change so that there could be some progress in Pakistan. He saw that countries that do well economically have to have some kind of a middle class that give the people the opportunity to move upwards.
For Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, education was the key for everything, not only for his own children, but for the people of Pakistan, because he knew with education, people will be able to stand on their own feet. They'll be productive members of society, and you can create democracy.
It was my father who was against the gender constraints of my time. He enabled me to appreciate that a woman is not a lesser creature.
I wore the veil once. When I was 13 years old, it's really like an initiation right into the world of adulthood. I remember when I wore it, it's hot, it's cumbersome, it's long, you trip over it. You can see the world through that black fabric. And it's not a clear world, it's a muted, grayish world. Papa and Mommy went to their bedroom, and Mommy said, Pinky wore her burqa. I made her wear it for the first time. Then he was quiet for a while, quite thoughtful. Then he just looked up, said there's no need for her to wear it. It was an extremely bold step for him to take, because until that time, No woman from the Bhutto family who reached adulthood had ever gone without burqa.
Not too long ago, I sat where you now sit, tramping to class in subarctic temperatures, fighting for books at Hillis Library, cramming for exams.
Oh, baby, baby, it's a wild world.
I met her first day of freshman year at Harvard. She was 16, I was 18.
She was quiet, she was studious, she made a small circle of friends, but this was 1969, and 6 months of her arrival, all the dorms went co-ed.
We were in the same dorm. She talked a lot about her own family. We have a lot in common. Benazir comes from a political family. She was very interested in politics, was interested in the world.
Not only was she becoming a grown-up, but she was independent for the first time, and her life was under her control, and no one else could control it, not Mummy, not Daddy, just Benazir.
This was the height of the Vietnam War, and she saw firsthand the power of the people to change a policy and to bring down a government.
She was very much exposed to the ideas of equal rights for women, and that was something that very much influenced her life.
It was the first time that I was in an environment where women were treated as full participants in society. It was that early experience, perhaps more than anything else, that shaped my political being.
India and Pakistan, of course, have fought numerous wars, but I think none was more bitter than the War of 1971.
India dismembered Pakistan, it split East and West Pakistan, East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh.
The loss was a humiliation to Pakistan. Not only had their geography changed, but their national sense of self was changed.
East Pakistan was a part of Pakistan, made with our own blood and our own sweat. If India thinks that she's rubbing Pakistan nose to the ground, and that Pakistan can come to a settlement in the way that she's behaving and has behaved in the past, that will then not bring about agreement. There will be endless bloodshed and confusion and chaos.
Bhutto was immediately rushed to the United Nations to negotiate peace with India.
It was great drama for the UN in its relatively young phase.
Yesterday, my 11-year-old son telephoned me from Karachi, and he said to me, "Do not come back. It's a document of surrender. We do not want to see you back in Pakistan if you come like that. We will fight. We'll go back and fight. My country hearkens for me. Why should I waste my time here in the Security Council? You can take your Security Council. Here you are. I'm going."
The UN was not going to intervene on the side of Pakistan. Zulfikar Bhutto made it very clear that Pakistan would not surrender. He didn't come to New York to surrender. That propelled him into a very strong national figure.
Bhutto could rally the masses, mesmerize the masses.
He formed Pakistan People's Party. To form Pakistan People's Party, he had a very simple, very popular slogan: food, clothes, and shelter. People of Pakistan were hurting because of the poverty, lack of education. There was no hope of prosperity.
Bhutto just swept the polls. People were waiting for change.
People who chanted the meaning of Pakistan is food, clothing, and shelter won the elections with massive majority.
He was the leader. Every organization, army, everybody was supporting him throughout.
He moved rapidly to make peace with India. Certainly his greatest diplomatic triumph was the Simla Accords.
I met Mrs. Gandhi in 1972 when I accompanied my father to Simla. I was wearing my first sari and I was very concerned that I might trip over the sari and it would come undone in front of all the international photographers.
I provided the interest in India. So much newspaper coverage, people wanted to do interviews with me. I was quite overwhelmed. And I remember my father called me one morning and said, "Have you seen these pictures of yourself? You look like Mussolini there. You have to be careful."
This was a negotiation in which he didn't have very many cards. After all, India was the victorious power. But using his diplomatic skills, he got a reasonably good bargain, which allowed for the return of some 95,000 Pakistani prisoners of war, reestablished normal relations between the two countries. This was very much a formative experience for Benazir. She watched her father operate. She had a diplomatic role as his hostess, and she absorbed many of his lessons of diplomacy.
My father always said, my daughter will make me more proud than Indira made her father. So my father always had the idea that I was a chip off the block.
We met when we were both in England, and I was at Cambridge, she was at Oxford. I was struck from the first moment I met her by her force of life.
Harvard was a place where she could really be herself. She wasn't in the limelight. At Oxford, there was a large Pakistani community. She was older, and I think she was thinking about her future career.
It was assumed that she would not go into politics. She did an interview shortly as she was to leave Oxford. The headline was, "No politics for the president's daughter." But at the same time, she had her eye on what was going on in Pakistan.
In 1974, India detonated a nuclear explosion. And so now Pakistan faced India that was 8 times the size and which had nuclear weapons.
Once India got the bomb, the Pakistani military started clamoring and telling Bhutto, we want nuclear weapons, otherwise how can we compete with the Indians? Bhutto made this famous speech, we will build the nuclear bomb, he announced in public, even if we have to eat grass for 1,000 years.
Bhutto was persuaded by the Ford administration not to go this path.
Dr. Kissinger actually was a friend of my father's and respected him greatly, and he tried to warn him as a friend. So he said, I don't want you to be made a horrible example of, and so you should not develop the nuclear device.
But that didn't quite work with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It was the nuclear power that essentially broke down Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the West.
The whole of the West was very, very anti-Pakistan because they thought we were doing an injustice. It was a bad situation.
Like all great charismatic leaders, Bhutto had flaws, he had great strengths but great weaknesses, and very soon he was in trouble with the establishment, with even the people of Pakistan.
His allies became his opponents himself. He started losing traction with everybody who was part of his victory.
Her father had chosen to call elections. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was re-elected. They were contested, and a massive agitation started in Pakistan.
All this turmoil in Pakistan, protests on the street, big rallies against Pakistan People's Party.
He panicked.
He didn't do enough to spread Islam in the country, to appease the mullahs, if you will.
So he thought he would outflank them by pushing through reforms or demands that they wanted. He made Friday the national holiday, not Sunday. He banned alcohol in the country.
His agenda was too wide and too spread out. The large, huge alliance that he had, that pretty much crumbled down.
I'm not arrogant. I would hate to be arrogant or to consider myself to be arrogant. But certainly I am intolerant of certain stupid things.
When you have power and there's only you and you think you're more intelligent than the rest of the country, that's always a mistake.
I start for my winter vacation because it was my father's birthday. That night there was a dinner in honor of my father. I was told, come and meet the new chief of staff, General Zia Bhutto.
Zia was selected and kept as the Chief of Army Staff because he was the least threatening general in Pakistan Army. At least that's what Bhutto thought.
My father depended heavily on the reports of inter-services intelligence, so that this choice would make the army very happy.
He frog-leaped Zia over the heads of 5 other generals. Zia was, on the face of it, very humble. That's the phrase often he used, I am your humble servant. And Bhutto was taken in by this show of deference. And then what had to happen, happened.
Mr. Bhutto की हुकूमत खत्म हो चुकी है. सारे मुल्क में मार्शल नाफिज कर दिया गया है. कौमी और सूबाई असेंबलियां तोड़ दी गई हैं. सूबाई गवर्नर और वजीर हटा दिए गए.
General Zia-ul-Haq seized power in April 1977. Basically, there was a general election. Bhutto would have won that election, but his overzealous supporters in the state apparatus rigged that election, which created the atmosphere which permitted the military to come back in, with the green light given by the US. Henry Kissinger had said to Bhutto, we will make a horrible example out of you.
The charges that were brought against Zulfikar were never proven. They were not warranted. And so this was basically to get rid of him. And then after that, the troubles began for the family.
I was in my 3rd year in university. My brothers had to go back to school. My mother and my father said, even if they try and take you off the plane, if they do whatever, don't, under any circumstances, come out of the airplane. Just stay there and go and finish your education.
He was concerned particularly for the boys, for their safety.
I never knew what was happening to my family. I never knew what was happening to my father. My brother was in Oxford, so I used to go and try and visit him.
They didn't have that proximity over that last 1 year, which Benazir had with her father. Week after week, she'd go to jail to see him, and it was during that period she had these very intense conversations with him about leadership and about the people.
Once her father was toppled and imprisoned, she now became very engaged, very active.
So here we had overnight another charismatic Bhutto.
He gave her the mantle of the party, and in a normal Islamic society they would give it to the eldest son. But Zulfikar Ali Bhutto gave it to the eldest child, the one he thought could best do the job, and it was a woman.
It was a huge ongoing struggle for the clearing of her father's name. Then things went from bad to worse.
If my father is executed, I honestly do not believe we can talk of Pakistan as it exists today. We cannot talk of a viable country. Pakistan cannot stay united. Pakistan will disintegrate.
Mir went around the world to lobby leaders to try and save Zulfikar from the executioner's noose.
Our message to General Zia is that release my father and hold free election and let the people decide the fate of the country.
We have come out against the military regime headed by General Zia-ul-Haq, which we feel is acting in a manner which is prejudicial.
We were so isolated, and I just used to pretend that it's not going to happen.
Zia knew as long as Zulfikar is alive, Zia can never stay president of the country.
What do you think that your father would look back on as his own mistakes?
Perhaps choosing General Zia as Chief of Staff?
Father, very intelligent, Coriolanus in Shakespeare, finally falls out with his own supporters, weakens, and his enemies pounce on him. The whole story of the Bhuttos has strong elements of a Greek tragedy.
They called the jail superintendent and said, this is the last meeting. He said, yes. He said, has the date been fixed? He said, yes. He said, for when has it been fixed? He said, tonight. My father said to him, well, make arrangements for me to shave, to have a bath. It's beautiful earth, and I want to be clean. And he said that tonight I'll be free.
My father was very calm, and he talked of family matters, he talked of party matters, and I keep seeing his face. I said that I'd like to hug my father goodbye. He'd been the president, the prime minister, he'd brought them back from the camps of India. They wouldn't even open the cell doors for me to kiss him goodbye. Said, this is goodbye until the final meeting. And those were the last words he spoke to either my mother or myself.
Well, I don't want to say much. I came just to tell you that was the personal tragedy. And they've tried to break our father. They've tortured him for 2 years. They couldn't do that. They tried to ruin his political name, and now they've killed him. We have nothing to be ashamed of. They have buried a martyr today.
Zia's rule proved to be the worst period in Pakistan's history. A fear enveloped the country, and many people said, if they can hang Bhutto, who the hell are we?